Greetings, fellow Garth Ennis aficionados. Bluedragonfive here.
And Rohith Dhar.
And we're back talking The Boys. Season 5. Why Season 5 and not Season 4? Well, Season 4 was dicey and I got outvoted. So here we are talking Season 5 because, we somehow have covered both seasons of Gen V and we figured, we got to see it to the end. We gotta talk Season 5. I guess just to keep it brief and just kind of like fill in the blanks and just kind of like I guess somewhat kind of recap how we were feeling, at least how I was feeling about the boys and just kind of the season overall briefly. So season 4 of the boys was rough. I think ultimately it was falling prey to the shortcomings of the comic, which I mean I guess condensed is that season 4 you had a little too much shock value in places, and the plot was kind of dragging on and kind of a little convoluting itself, which is kind of the momentum drag of the boys comic from what I experienced with it myself, from what I did read of it. And it's but I get like the draw of the boys is ultimately it's the premise and the fact that there is an ending, that it's building to an end, versus like kind of the age old thing with comics that they always go on, the story never ends kind of a thing, and like the boys is one of those unique stories where there is absolutely an ending. So intentionally I kept blinders on to the specifics of the comic, where I kind of knew a little bit about the ending, but I didn't. I knew elements of the ending, and I knew like I knew half of the ending that we saw. I knew like not the ending, but I knew what happens right after the ending. That I knew.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know where we were gonna set it, but I knew like specifically we have an encounter between two characters, and we were gonna have that. Everything else was I kind of went into kind of blind and excited with the last season. Like, well, man, I kind of know a little like my experience with Invincible. Only Invincible, I read through all the stuff there, but I'm trying to forget about that. The boys is a little spotty and just kind of like fill in the blanks as I've kind of gone along the way here. So, have no idea how it all fit together ultimately, and obviously the show very different animal than the comic, and how they've kind of conveyed that story, and they kind of throw a few things in there as we can tell by this season. So, I still feel overall, I still feel the show tracks better and smoother than the comic did. Season 5, I think, really course corrected, and ultimately, I think, at least specifically the last episode, I think it stuck the landing myself. Still not as good and well told as seasons 1 through 3 in terms of quality, but again, the finality of I think going into the last season, knowing that there's like an air of finality to it, knowing like we are building to kind of an end of the story, not factoring in all the spin-offy, the irony of like the Vault universe and spin-off plans and all this kind of stuff, not factoring that in, just like taking the story on its own. I think it helped. I mean, season 5, it takes some big swings for sure, but maybe here's the thing: it takes some big swings, and I feel ultimately we have a lot of really good ideas in 5, and it just feels like perhaps if we somehow could have split some of the ideas we had in 5 and kind of added them to season 4, maybe things would be a lot more cohesive. It's very speculative, so I can't say that for sure, but it feels like we could have taken some of the good stuff here and maybe kind of like developed it a little bit more in 4, and maybe we weren't worrying about the approaching spin-offs, or if we rearrange certain spin-offs, or like kind of trim and cut and just kind of put a few things here and there, like for example maybe not 2 seasons of Gen V, maybe we get Vault Rising beforehand, may have helped. Not sure, but all I know is some people are really divided on season 5. They've said it's gone off a cliff since 4 onward. I liked 5. That's all I'm gonna say. I liked season 5. What say you, lawyer?
In certain spots, there's some highlights and high points of the season. I think overall, the show ended in a manner that is so contrary to how the show started. I think the cracks were there in the show from season 3. and then got more pronounced season 4. I will say season 5 is not the worst season. I think season 4 is the worst of
Yeah.
the 5. But ultimately, with the way this show ends, it felt rushed. It felt cowardly. And in light of me being aware of the spinoffs, it is a shadow of itself. The things that the boys satirize and poke fun at and undermine comedically, it has become the thing that it's made fun of. The jest, the jester has become the joke, and ultimately, whether Vault Rising is just a straight up prequel and there won't be any references or mentions for things in present day post this finale, I think in totality, with the 5 seasons of the boys in the in but of themselves, and even with like the 2 seasons of Gen V, I I think this is a hollow ending. I think certain things, not that it don't make certain things just fall flat in the sense that this show started out as an indictment of the the industry, the complex of military, politics, religion, industry, and utilizing superheroes at the cost of the inner humanities of superheroes. And it has transitioned from that to being a slightly more edgy CW show with Homelander being the reverse Flash equivalent. I It's such a step down. The first 2 seasons are great, and third season, it's fine, it's all right, but fourth and fifth is just any sort of goodwill, any sort of moment of satire or insight is just swept under the hackneyed, points to be made, the obvious references to current culture and politics. It just feels I don't feel the excitement or the value of the boys as a piece of superhero media. I think whatever it had at the beginning, whether by corporate mandate or just by the impact of online discourse and just the overall state of politics and culture in the world, it's lost a sense of its purpose, identity, and it just feels just like any other superhero show, but with blood and some level of sex.
All right, so I guess just breaking it down a little here. So we kind of cover, I guess some of the talking points here. So our status quo post the cliffhanger of season 4, where basically the kind of our kind of our non-powered characters are captured. They're put into the freedom camps. Basically, we've had the Starlighters. Starlighter Resistance, kind of like broadly, they're labeled terrorists. They're basically labeled a terrorist group. While and Homelander has these freedom camps and basically has imprisoned Huey, Frenchie, and Mother's Milk. Um, Basically, then we see them surviving. Kind of the hopeless situation best they can, and Frenchie, he's keeping it working on the soup virus. Huey's he's kind of ultimately Huey's role in the season is that of he's kind of the antithesis to the Butcher. He's very much kind of the optimist in kind of this in the conflict. Anyway, so yeah.
And I think with Butcher and Huey, all that happens, and I want to get jump too far ahead. It feels to me that this show was really hampered. I think the season 5 especially was really hampered by Homelander being this totalizing force, and the stuff that happens post Homelander's end could have been its own season. But the fact that it wasn't, it just kind of wrapped up in whatever bow. I think the in earlier seasons of the show, there would be some level of nuance and discourse and back and forth among the boys about certain heroes, whether they should live or not. And in this, it just feels so much that, Anthony Starr is such a great performer, and the way he plays Homelander is consistent throughout, even the writing isn't always up there. And yet I think the show just feels so like he's such a gravitational force, and not in a good way. It feels that the characters have kind of lost the sense of who is really the bad guy in my mind, which is Vought. Like there was hints of that with Stan Edgar, and but now with the way the show ends, it's kind of like, well, I guess Vought is a necessary evil. There's just not really. It just feels that when Butcher and Huey met at the beginning of the show, they met because what happened to Robin is indicative of a bunch of several other instances that have been enabled and put under the rug by Vought. And then now with the way the show ends, it almost feels like her death didn't matter to whatever degree it did. Um, and I don't know. It just feels the way.
I mean, I don't know. Her death mattered, and that facilitated the death of really like the bad flagship, like the evil flagship character of Vought.
No, but like that, but like that's the whole thing for Robin's death is that there are several other civilians that have been maimed, killed, and just been collateral damage for the superheroes, and Vought is the one that creates and funnels and makes the superhero like industry work the way it does. And that's the whole thing for Butcher. Like you need to bring all of them down. Homelander's the biggest like offender, but he's not the only like it's old soups have to go. And I feel like that just has been lost after the first and second season. And especially with like Soldier Boy, I think we want to discuss more Soldier Boy. He was so wasted this season.
Okay, well, an example of something kind of like an early seasons versus the seasons now. So we have a big plot point that opened like in the first episode. Annie leaked the flight 37 video. Am I getting the number right? It was flight 37.
I think so, but I think it's not as relevant to what the point you're wanting to make with regards to the flight video.
Okay, the point being, Annie, she leaked the big famous, flight video from way back. Very iconic moment in the first season of The Boys. We see Homelander's like true colors and just these easy. Well, not that we didn't know it already, but we really see it like big time and like a really through Maeve's eyes, just like this horrific. Like he lets the plane full of passenger plane full of people go down, and she reveals at a shareholders meeting, and again, this is a thing that basically saved everyone's lives in season 2. That they were threatening to release this video, and now we've kind of we've done it here, and it's the fact that then big deal. Now we revealed the video and write it off as AI because that's kind of where the culture is now, where The Boys very much reflects a lot of as the Kripke's kind of going on record. He's kind of said this, where like the political climate, kind of the way things have gone, it's definitely bled its way into the show and these elements, the things that they didn't consider years back when they started the show. And they just kind of like by the midway point, it was like really starting to just kind of like really funnel in there and kind of direct things. And I think it's like a plot point that would have had a really big ripple effect that ultimately is like, well, we just, it's like, hey, we might have struck a really big blow here. It's like, no, it's AI. Look at the extra finger. And we add that, we convince the folks that, oh yeah, not real. And people buy it. They eat, they eat like lambs.
I don't know if I necessarily buy that that Homeland wouldn't suffer consequences, because ultimately the thing is that it's a really lazy way of dealing with that flight video reveal, because I guess like it goes both ways, right? Because here's the thing, it's like if you can have AI of Homelander doing bad stuff, like if there's people that are already like anti Homelander for whatever reason, they could also say, well, any time they'd show him doing good, whether it's staged or not, like that's also like that's the thing. It's like I just feel like Kripke kind of just did a surface level of take on the whole AI thing, because the whole thing with AI is that it's not just people can like hand wave bad things as action not occurring. By the same token, like good things or people saying whatever when it's like the whole point with AI doctor videos that nobody can really trust anything, and then for bad people they can kind of operate in this level of ambiguity, or the hey everyone's evil or whatever. And I just feel like that's not, and Kripke not going for that. Just say like Homelander doesn't suffer any consequences like that. To me, it's like it really kind of just dramatically undercut the weight of that video.
So let's bridge that. Let's bridge that into this. So Anthony Starr, obviously, fantastic as Homelander. Like you said, the Reverse Flash tier of performance, very captivating, very gravitational, but maybe, as you said, to the detriment of the show, in which it all revolves around Homelander. And to that point, it feels like, and I've kind of said this before, and it was kind of the not sorry. We when we talked Punisher, I kind of brought this up a little bit, and we should probably I won't bring it up here. It's kind of a Garth Ennis effect, but it's kind of like a thing in terms of adapting the Garth Ennis properties. But I think it's most specifically with the boys. The boys, again, the comic very much thrived in shock value, and an issue is like again after a while, especially going into season 5, it's like how do you ratchet it up from what we've seen before in terms of getting shock value? In terms of like we don't build to violence, that we just use it so casually and explosively as we do. You got to be really creative in how you kind of work that. Now again, that's just kind of in terms of the violence. But what I'm getting at in terms of Homelander is it to a similar degree. We've built Homelander up so much, and I still love the scenes we get with Homelander. But when you look at it, it's like that video being leaked the way it is, and it's just kind of like rolling off him like a duck. It's that he's at a point where he cares. His whole thing was he cared about what people think of him. That was kind of like the kryptonite of the soups, and that nothing could hurt him except public opinion. Like I guess the most we saw Tech Knight financially in public opinion in terms of helping all the charitable causes. But in general, though, it's the fact that there was always if Homelander doesn't care anymore, and that was a big moment at the end of I think it was the end of season 3. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was the end of season 3. We had the bit where we throw the brick at Ryan and then Homelander like lasers a guy in the crowd, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing, and that was a great moment. But the problem is that's kind of the we've kind of broken the ceiling with that moment. We kind of break the universe too. Well, it opens up a lot of doors, but if we don't properly go through them, like we didn't really do and there was an attempt at in 4, but it was the beginning of the problem. Is that's a big moment where Homelander he does something egregious in the public, which ordinarily he would not do. It was him kind of acting in kind of in somewhat of a misguided but a paternal sense, like he was protecting his son or more so acting instinctively to protect his son, using the abuse of power that he's always kind of done, the irresponsible use of power. And the public cheered him for that horrible act, and that was kind of like the tipping point of like the real world maybe kind of seeping in a little bit, but also a little bit. I guess what I'm getting at. Sorry, it's the thing of like that was kind of open the floodgates for if Homelander is not facing consequences enough for like the bad actions that he does, it gets to a point where he can do as much all these atrocities and all these bad things, and people, the large majority of people, judging by this season, even though there are detractors, they're going to cheer for him. They're gonna laud him for it, and it just adds to the point where he can get away with anything he wants, like he does in this season, especially towards the end. He can get away with anything he wants, and it's not really that surprising.
Yeah, but the thing is that like it feels that, and I feel like we need to, and I feel like I have to kind of acknowledge the elephant in the room. It feels that Eric Kripke, to his detriment, has made Homelander to be his idea of a Trump analogy. But the thing is, with both Trump and really with Homelander, it's just like Homelander wasn't invincible in public relations. Part of his strength and weakness was that he was subservient to human opinion. And that was the contradiction. That was the dichotomy. That was what made him such an interesting character. When you make it so that everyone loves him, regardless of whatever he does, at that point, you just kind of taken away what makes him so interesting. Because at that point, what is holding Homelander back? Because at the end of the day, like him thinking it's like, oh, he feels the self-loathing. It's like, well, the self-loathing is because he thinks people don't love him. But if people publicly love him, even if he's at his worst behavior, like, what is the point for him to have this kind of existential, angst and all that? Like, okay, maybe it's not sincere, maybe everyone's all afraid of him, but it's just And
Well, the way I read it and the way in the season 5, I think, works it to its advantage to a point is, Homelander's looking for genuine affection versus like, fear. And like, for example, like, the Deep, it's a very sycophant kind of relationship where, the Deep is just trying to like, he's almost like the dog from the Looney Tunes, like, we're pals, right? Kind of thing. He's just pathetic. Where, he's looking for genuine affection and genuine like, but everywhere he turns, he either ruins it or it's just not there. Like he's trying to force it, like with all the Soldier Boy stuff, which I really like that in regards to the the father son kind of stuff we're doing there.
the thing is that like Homelander, he has powers and everything. But I think his greatest power, especially in the early seasons, was that he knew how to play the public.
Yes,
he knew to put on a performance and all that, especially the speech and like.
But we made him a little too crazy this season. I'm God now, that's a hard sell.
Especially with like how like we just saw Stillwell like with like as an angel with breast milk and all that. It's like it feels that Homelander's restoring.
It was kind of the jump the shark moment, admittedly.
He's been like his sort of idiosyncrasies and like little Freudian obsessions have just now kind of been the totalizing force. Whereas I feel like Homelander, for all intents and purposes, like with the way Homelander is, like from maybe middle season 3 onward, I just don't buy that he could be able to put on a public front as compared to the first 2 seasons. Like the first 2 seasons, like he's as much of a PR animal as he is like an animal. And I think that, and I feel like that was sort of the whole kind of not trick, but that was the whole kind of appeal about the Homelander. For as much as he's a monster, he made the decisions he's made. His sort of like pathological need for like human affection was put in by Vought. Vought has made him has made this monster.
Yes.
And the fact that like we've kind of gone away and Homelander's this big bad, it's like Homelander didn't come from nowhere. He is the natural extension of the system put in place by Vought International to make gods out of frail human beings, and this god happened to be Satan. And I feel like that it's just strange to me that there's no discussion about how do we prevent another Homelander from coming about? Because we had Godolkin, we have Soldier Boy, we have like any other like superheroes that have nearly the same capability or same skill of violence as Homelander, and it's just a matter of time of certain personalities not gelling well to V or lifestyle or rearing. It's just like these heroes were as victims as they are monsters, and I think that just kind of went by the wayside for a reason, because the shock and awe of like any particular superhero acting violent just kind of washed over any of the nuanced like critique and commentary on the systems that these heroes operate in.
I mean, when you look at, again, I don't think the show suffered from this as much, but in general with the concept of the boys, again, it's the thing of like, I'm going to use a weird analogy here. Just go with me on it. I've always, the show Invader Zim, you remember Invader Zim, right?
I know, yeah.
Okay, so Invader Zim, I always had trouble getting into when I watched it, because it was such kind of a cynical such a cynical take on humanity. And basically we have like our alien protagonist who is like amongst humanity, but we've made humanity very much in kind of the Jonah and Vasquez kind of like cynical, kind of comedic kind of vein. But it was the fact of like, humanity was so unlikable. I know it's kind of the point, but it was just made it really hard to get in, like live in that universe. They kind of feel comfortable there. So it was relentlessly uncomfortable, like with the surroundings. I'm not saying Invader Zim didn't work for what it was, and it wasn't. It was funny for sure, but it's just taking something like that and just with the boys, that we live in a world that is just cynical and just getting incredibly cynical, in the fact that we did not have, like the inkling of hope. And I think the show kind of had that in the beginnings, like you had your Hugh Campbells, and you had that kind of like champion amidst the darkness there, and him befriending these other cynical guys, but kind of like along with Annie and Starlight, they were kind of like like a little the light in the darkness, so to speak. And we added like shades to characters like Butcher, and that's the thing, we kind of found a way to there was like hope that we were rooting for the boys to win out versus just like reveling in them, just killing these very corrupted superheroes, which the boys comic more or less pretty much is. It's like, oh, the world's not getting better. These guys barely have a prayer. We're just rooting for them to get their guy in the end. It was kind of like the delusion of hope is kind of what the show had, I guess. And I get
you have.
I guess what I'm saying overall is that, so again, it's the sustainability of that, which is going to become too overwhelming if like literally everywhere you turn, like with very, very, you can count on one hand exceptions of like soups that genuinely are good, and it's just going to be like, oh man, did Compound V help no one? Ultimately the flaw, almost like the Jurassic Park kind of like, why couldn't John Hammond just create a T-Rex that didn't eat meat? It's kind of like the flaw is like, what is the have these going back to like episode 1 of The Boys? Have you like? I want to hear who you saved today. Like, if the saves are like always like a PR kind of move and like orchestrated and everything, it's like, did they ever save anyone? Like, what really makes them a hero if they barely save anyone ever?
But that's the thing. The whole point. So in the comics, and then in the show, the whole thing about these respective superheroes is there's no supervillains. And so because of that, there's not there's not a moral obligation for these people to be heroic in the traditional sense, because all the regular human criminals or bad guys can easily taken out. So essentially they're just kind of gods. And think about the Greek pantheon. They're just kind of degenerates. They're self-grandizing, all that stuff. And in the comics, the whole thing for Garth Ennis is that he made all these superheroes be what they are, because ultimately Garth Ennis had an invective against the superhero genre for being so totalizing over the rest of the comic industry that other comic genres like crime, horror, war, specific to Garth Ennis, romance, whatever, just didn't have its own, niche audiences, whatever. And I think, Ennis, for whatever you can say about the execution ball, I think he has a legitimate point about superheroes being such a totalizing force in comics. And then in the show, the whole picture is that what if superheroes in this world would just be celebrities? They would just be people, they would just be soulless, beings that are selling products. And the humanity and the we need to get this machine churning and all that stuff. That's but what's funny you mentioned about the cynicism of it all. The first 2 seasons, The Boys had superheroes that were willing to do the right thing.
Yeah,
Maeve, A-Train, Lamplighter to a certain extent. There were actual human. There's actual human being. If anything, the show actually did go out of its way to show there was some people that had some level of genuine humanity and all that stuff. Even
we had the humanity in there in the show.
But the thing is that as the show went on, it almost kind of feels like the show just they didn't really emphasize those exceptions throughout the CSA season 3 onward. And so, but yet they didn't acknowledge it in the text of the show to say, hey, the superheroes that are good are the exception to the rule. And the whole thing about superheroes, the power, it's supposed to be analogous to money, to fame, to wealth. It corrupts, or more likely it reveals who you are. And most human beings can't handle or shouldn't handle that kind of power and influence and godlike status or close to godlike status. And that was the whole thing why Vaughn needed to go down. And the way the show ends is okay, Homelander was just an exception. It's not an indictment of the system. And so for all intents and purposes, there's not going to be anything dealt with Vought in present day post the status quo. It's Vought had Homelander and his superheroes operating shitty ways, but so long as one doesn't go too crazy, they can be okay to operate in the system that they operate in. That I feel is more cynical. I think the show ended in a much more cynical place than not.
All right. Now let's see. Teddy says he has thoughts, but I've yet to see those thoughts, so I think we're gonna move on. Mm-hmm. Let's see. So I mean, so overall, our main. Okay, we'll get there. So our main plot overall is that it's basically save our guys, test the virus, stop Homelander from using the V1, which I think I don't know. I think kind of flowed V1 obviously being kind of maybe a straw that breaks the camel's back. It's kind of a I think if overall I think just in terms of how we get from point A to point B within the episodes, I think it kind of flows nicely. But like we have our complications within like the plot lines, like with the boys, it's like we have a mission. There's the complication. We got to find a way around it. Let's see. So I mean, as far as like the finality goes for the season, we have like we're kind of paying off certain relationships, and we're kind of seeing our characters kind of really put through the ringer until they reach their kind of their ending, their closure. Like Frenchie and Kimiko, their relationship is I thought was fleshed out really nicely. Like they're addressing the the issue of kind of Kimiko already has kind of a built-in immortality, and if she had gotten the V1, it would have been very long-standing. So I feel like they had kind of some adult conversations about um, about like where the relationship was would be heading, and like if there is an extinction of soups, then perhaps they just, they live things out the best they can, until that day comes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, let's see.
You there, Dragon? Hello. All right, folks. Dragon might be out of internet. All right, you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that. It's something else.
Yeah, sorry, y'all. Dragon sometimes will appear in and out of the Phantom Zone. So,
Right. All right. Okay, you can hear me though, right?
yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Here, let's see. I guess maybe we should talk about Soldier Boy.
Soldier Boy, the way he was written really frustrated me because it feels like that the show didn't know whether to land on Soldier Boy genuinely caring for Homelander as a son or liking him up to a certain point or just disliking him altogether. He could have been all three, and the writing for it was so like like slabberdash that I didn't feel like the creators for the show knew what to do with Soldier Boy. And I think they just kind of had that character last long because of Justin Ackles being who he is, being a guy that people like Eric Kripke and all the supernatural folks love working with. And I just don't feel like they had like it just feels like the more Soldier Boy's gone on, I just feel like I don't know what the point of that character is thematically or satirically. Like it just feels like it was an excuse this character was made to have Jensen Ackles be part of a successful show. And as more time goes by, it's just like what is the character's deal and what makes him you like worthwhile to follow.
I mean, look I love Soldier Boys in general in the show. Mind you, we've only really gotten 2 seasons of them, but from what we've gotten of them, I've found them very fascinating, especially in season 3. But just the idea that we've taken this very, very kind of like a gag based character from the boys comedy. Soldier Boy is pretty much, and we have a little reference to it here. He was like, what if Captain America were cowardly and wetting himself at the sign of trouble?
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially, that was Soldier Boy just in the comics, and we found a way to really kind of add him, give him layers, and just kind of like almost take like the kind of an MCU Captain America mold, but like, what if the wrong guy got the serum? Which obviously we've done in universe with the MCU to a lesser degree.
I
Um, well, I mean, like it's not the same. It's not.
no. But my issues is this like Homelander being evil Superman, or it's like the thing is that Homelander isn't like an exact 1-to-1 to Superman, and beyond just having the attire, like but he has his own unique like. I will say though, like his background, like it's like taking how could Superman be raised in an environment that would make him an evil person, and I feel like there could have been something there with Soldier Boy, especially his background. Like Steve Rogers was like a, impoverished or working class Irish immigrant, son of Irish immigrants, who through his heart of heart, like got lucky to join the program. And with how Ben, the guy who became Soldier Boy, he had a different background, being a like from basically just a washed up kid, like rich kid that wanted to get the goal to glory. It just doesn't feel to me that with what is made of Soldier Boy's background, his psychology just doesn't feel as interesting or as consequential from his background as to say like Homelander with how he's raised. I can understand why he's the way he is. Soldier Boy, like I know it's all an act, but I never really see Soldier Boy actually not be something outside the act of being the tough guy, macho guy, right? If characters say in the narratives, "Oh, you're just putting an act," but when he isn't being like super aggro or super like toxic masculinity and all that, he's just vulnerable in a still traditional masculine sense. He's not pathetic. He's not like sniveling. He's not something where he's not like for a guy who is like a washed up rich kid, he doesn't give off the vibes that he's like that at all, like in his private moments. Whereas Homelander, being a guy who was raised by a corporation and had just very select women to kind of nurture this Freudian, was like, yeah, it's a very apparent with how he acts. I don't feel like that the show really explored and utilized the psychology of Soldier Boy as well as say Homelander or even other heroes, that had their own particular backgrounds.
I mean, look, I disagree to an extent. I think this season in particular, I mean, like season three is another that was more of just like introduction to kind of Soldier Boy and just kind of how he carried himself. But I think we peeled back some layers in this season. I think we, the whole like there was a theme of fatherhood that was kind of like pertinent in a lot of parts in this season, but primarily through the Soldier Boy Homelander stuff. And I really like that we kind of because we didn't really deal with that until the tail end of season three when he was tasked to take out Homelander and he found out that the two of them were related. And here I think we mine some material from it in that we see that we see the two of them kind of in comparison of each other, where you have Soldier Boy who is this this is a guy who internalizes his vulnerability, which yes we haven't really. Again, he plays his cards very close to the chest. Just, like Sage can't Sage can't get a read on the guy because he's that just kind of locked down. Like the man feels a vulnerability, he feels a loneliness, which he seemingly handles, or depending on how you measure it, handles infinitely better than Homelander. How he handles his loneliness. Like Homelander, the idea, he's a scary, unstable, kind of character. Soldier Boy, of course, he when he's around Soldier Boy, Homelander's reduced to like a kid eager to please and impress his father, which what we do know about Soldier Boy is ultimately why he took on the program in the first place. He wanted to impress his father, who you took a shortcut,
I
So I'm seeing like parallels between like there's a similarity that Soldier Boy won't acknowledge, that there are elements of Homelander within himself, but he won't acknowledge it. And obviously they went different ways and different life paths, but like one's pleasing the father, the other one kept looking for a mother, and that kind of led to him wearing his vulnerabilities. I mean, not on his sleeve, but after we kind of threw playing to the public eye out the window, pretty much he wears it on his sleeve.
Because here's the thing, it just feels like in season 3 it's like, oh, Homeland, like Soldier Boy was the Homelander before Homelander, both in him being the top, and also, but he was bad enough that his own superhero team like sold him out to the Russians. And it feels like when he comes in the narrative, it's like, oh, like for as much as people don't like Homelander, it's probably not good for Soldier Boy to be out and about with his whole history of the mem and all that. It's like, and it just feels like the show doesn't really tackle on that, like Soldier Boy, for as much as he doesn't want to say he's like want to disavow Homelander. Homelander and Soldier Boy have a lot in common. I just feel like the way people treat Soldier Boy, they like Soldier Boy should be as scary, because if you're telling me that he was so scary and abusive to the level which other superheroes like basically let a mutiny, let a coup to have him be stuck on her eyes with the Russians, I feel like if Homelander's not the scariest person in the screen, Soldier Boy needs to be as scary in a different way. It doesn't have to be like the same sociopathic, like reverse Flash kind of a deal. Like it feels like to me like John Walker in Captain America and then sorry, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is like a more evil or more like actually um better, darker version of Captain America than Soldier Boy. I feel like Soldier Boy is just a lot of talk to how bad of a dude he is, but he just kind of feels like a guy who, oh, all right, the worst thing that can happen to Soldier Boy is that he just drinks booze and then sleeps with like elderly prostitutes, and people say, oh, he's so bad that like he's a danger, he's as much of a danger as Homelander. But I just don't, it just feels like it's all talk and not shown in the text. Like what's the scariest thing that Soldier Boy did in the narrative? Is on the narrative. And I feel like there's nothing that's scary as scary as even the least scary of Homelander. And I make this point because it's like,
well, the scariest thing he did was we did the Black Noir in season 3.
yeah, but that was just a car. Like, but that's the thing. It's like that's not even like Homelander's like worst. Like
That he was willing to kill his own grandson and everything. Is, I don't know.
No, it's no. But the thing is that Homelander, even if he's not directed violence, like the way he comports and acts this is a guy who his background makes him a danger, and I just don't feel like I get the sense that it was a mistake or someone like Ben should not have become Soldier Boy. Because for all intents and purposes, like I feel like he can be persuaded to do the right thing or serve national interests, and just if he just left his own devices, like he wouldn't be much of a danger to anyone besides like being abusive to his teammates. And so it's like it just feels like the scale of Soldier Boy's like violence or threat to other human beings is so small potatoes compared to all the other heroes that it just makes me wonder. It's like, okay, like why do people in this new universe treat him as like someone to not mess with if he's just a guy that wouldn't care to be much of a superhero? Like he just does it in between like doing lines of coke and all that stuff.
Okay, so we're going to take a sec here because I'm getting into it. Teddy in the comments here. He says I'm not reading this stuff. Well, okay, Teddy, half of your stuff is about talking about like Homelander's death, which we kind of want to talk about other stuff before we get there. Okay, and now hopefully I'll be able to throw some comments up on the screen, such as hopefully they're behind the scenes listening. I think Soldier Boy is less deluded and psychotic as Homelander, and that's the difference. He says to you, Rohit. So Soldier Boy is toxic. Homelander is basically crazy at this point. Is how I view it.
No. I know the differences are made between the two characters, but for me, it's like if that's the case, then like, what is it okay if Homelander's gone and Soldier Boy operates as being leader of the Seven? Like, I'm just trying to understand, like, because with the way Soldier Boy was and presented the narrative, it's like, hey, he's a necessary evil against Homelander, but he is evil in himself. Like, there's a reason why he ended up with the Russians in the first place, and that we talked about like him having collateral damage and killing like MM's grandfather and all that stuff.
Well, yeah, he didn't kill him directly though.
Okay, so he committed collateral damage and then killed a bunch of civilians, presumably black civilians, and like.
Well, wait, wasn't the whole wait? Sorry, do you mean MM's father?
Yeah, no. His
grandfather. Okay, his grandfather. Okay, that's one. Sorry, I thought you said his father.
No. But that's the thing. It's like A-Train was treated like scum for like manslaughter for Robin, and Soldier Boy is just kind of like, oh, it's just acknowledged. It's like, no, like Soldier Boy's badness, like, I mean, he doesn't have to be on the level of Homelander, but he also has to be a unique type of evil for the show to really like grapple with and think of like, okay, the Butcher like and the boys are making a really dangerous choice and having this guy out beyond about. And I don't feel like he's as much of a danger as the narrative as the narrative tries to say he's as much of a danger.
Well, no point did they really say he was like as evil as Homelander. Or
no, it's not about how you use it. It's just like, okay, you take Homelander out and then Soldier Boy is in charge. That doesn't mean things are good. Things could be bad in its own separate way. And I just feel like we don't get to see like
Well, it's basically whoever, whatever Soldier Boy, whoever's marching orders, whether it be his own or like Vaught's, he follows. There's no stopping him. That's the problem with Soldier Boy. But that's, the
Yeah.
fact that Soldier Boy doesn't seem to be able to be controlled. But then again, he keeps getting the wool pulled over his eyes. Keeps ending up in that cryo chamber. So then again, he's a dangerous weapon, but it's not really.
He's Worf. He's basically Worf from TNG, where like, oh, he's a formidable guy, but like people get one over him, and he just kind of gets put on ice or like. That's the thing. It's like if he's as bad, if
Okay,
he's
Worf's thing was like power scaling, though. That's the difference,
no,
though. Worf's
I mean
whole thing is
it's
we have to
power.
show this guy's a
It's
big
power
bad.
no, it's a power scaling, but I think it's similar into the sense like, oh, you have a dude that like can be a threat, but it's kind of taken off of the board because like it kind of breaks the narrative. It's like it's like say Martian, like if say Martian Manhunter or Superman JLU or
Yeah,
Justice League like gets knocked off, it's like he gets knocked off because then the plot would like last for the full
that's
episode.
right. Because again, he can technically erase. He can erase everyone's powers if he wanted to.
Yeah, and at that point, like why have a character with that kind of power if you're like
But that's why they made him ambivalent, though.
yeah, and at that point it's just like his ambivalence just doesn't make him really interesting. Like the thing is that for all the heroes and the boys, they're messed up and they're flawed, and that the whole thing is that these people shouldn't have these powers because their flaws or existential angst or ennui like exacerbates and leads to a lot of death and destruction in their wake. And there's exceptions to it, and that Soldier Boy just doesn't feel like left his own devices. He's a danger to other people.
All right, well, let me look. What I liked about Soldier Boy was, so again, it's like, sorry, again, I like kind of seeing like the seeds between Soldier Boy and Homelander and how like one kind of impacted the other. Like for example, Soldier Boy, his daddy issues ultimately is kind of what he's dealing with. Is kind of what's being thrown back at him. I think Soldier Boy at some point he kind of recognizes that in that he doesn't. Yeah, that's right. Let me back it up here. Something really great that kind of complicates this father son relationship is that the whole reason he was put on ice is because they replaced him the first moment they could, which was Homelander. That's the thing. Like he was the replacement for Soldier. So just in premise, it's like they can. It's a huge roadblock for them getting along. Like you're the reason I was like frozen for decades because they replaced me with you, and they wanted something that could fly. They outmoded me. You know, between that again, it's just also like the fact that they the reason he was put on ice as well was that they shared these similar character flaws. The ego, the lack of empathy, he's brutal to his teammates. It's again he detests his own weakness, which they both kind of have. It's the weakness within themselves, which is kind of why Homelander hates the deep, or like this it has such contempt for the deep to some degree. You might be able to say, I don't know. But yeah, it's the fact that like Homelander, he could have, he craved nurturing from a mother, which again is kind of where the weakness on his sleeve is, which sorry, it's basically I guess it's interesting that Stormfront, they kind of love this, the whole Clara Stormfront thing is interesting. And obviously, there's a lot of setup there for this Vault Rising thing they're probably doing.
Yeah, and that I'm not also a huge fan of. Like the show, like just kind of stopping its tracks to just set up. Oh, here are these characters that we follow more of in this spinoff. It's like okay,
Well, some of that is like stuff that's logical. Like, okay, well, we would track them because we've established them in the show prior to this point. We would see them, so if we just throw a little reference to them, as far as it affects the plot, which it does, but for example, Quinn, that's something we're throwing in for the show. Like, okay, random guy who Soldier Boy has an attachment to. That's interesting, but we're not going to talk about it here. We're going to talk about it in the spinoff. That's a problem.
I mean the bold bomb side and Golden Geisha of it all. It's
Yeah.
just like all right, we just kind of focus on these two characters who were just brought in new. And we're just there for an episode two, and we'll get more of their backstory in the prequel. And it's like
Yeah.
that is just that I think was not a good use of resources. Like there could have been a better way of delving into into Soldier Boy's past without having to kind of feel like the narrative is just setting up the spinoff. And even this like that's the thing. It's just like I see the mechanics, I see the behind the scenes like handiwork, and that's not something that I should be able to see in a narrative.
Well, regardless, taking it for what it is, I do like that. It's this twisted thing where they kind of they love the same woman who valued power above all else, and dangerously was kind of like the dangerously so was like the perfect woman for Homelander in that sense, in that she was again the whole Oedipus thing with them, which is compounded on with the fact that she was involved with his father. It's just the fact that this woman was very much like the mother who couldn't be killed, essentially, at least not directly by him. He could be rough with her, and like unlike Madeline Sitwell, was it Stillwell or Sitwell?
So well.
Stillwell, sorry, Madeline Stillwell. And that was the thing. Like, what if there was a Madeline who I couldn't easily kill, and that's kind of what he had with Stormfront, which is twisted. But that's then she championed him in his faults, and basically she kept bolstering him and saying he was the best there was, and that But then of course she wanted to take it to the nth degree, which he initially balked at, which by the end he kind of is ultimately. The Ubermensch and all the you're kind of leading the charge.
Yeah, the whole Soldier Boy, Homelander, Stormfront, love triangle, Indiana Jones vibe, like that to me was just kind of, because the thing is that like I'm just trying to understand like what, because like Stormfront, was originally Clara, and then like Miss Liberty, and then she kind of just like hid in the shadows or whatever, and then Soldier Boy is like with Crimson Countess. I just feel like that whole plot just did not work for me, because ultimately it just feels that like I can understand why Homelander was into Stormfront and why Stormfront would be into Homelander.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could necessarily buy that, especially if she just starts out as like the former wife of like
Frederick Vought.
I don't know if I would buy her being into Ben.
Well, again, that's the thing. If she admires power and like something that's gonna bring kind of this it's essentially like post-war this Vought Rising show is set in the 50s. Now, my guess, again, I know it's bad that we have to speculate based on the show, but if I were to just infer, it's not really just based on that. It's just based on we have a time period. I would guess post-war, she's looking for like the next Reich. She's looking for like the next the comeback for the Nazis, which ultimately is what she wanted with Homelander too, and just kind of with their whole Stormfront persona, the whole neo-Nazi thing.
Yeah.
And I feel that perhaps that was kind of what she was looking towards. And again, it's more an attraction of power than it is like she genuinely likes him. For all we know, again, she's manipulating. She could be manipulating both of them. I'd like to think she genuinely liked Homelander, but then again, as we've seen, the man is easily manipulated when it comes to like a maternal figure.
I mean, true, but I think also that the point is like she can suss that Homelander genuinely wants to be powerful and admired, and I think yes, Ben to a certain extent wants that in terms of getting the glory and not be kind of to the wayside. But I feel like his interest in he just wanted to get the attention of like women and adulations and just kind of make his dad proud.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like Homelander, on a deep psychological level, he feels that in order for him to find value in his life, he has to be the most powerful, most benevolent, most like the apex of the superheroes. And I think Stormfront, I can understand being attracted to that kind of drive and ambition. Whereas I feel like for Ben, it's like a Soldier Boy. It's like it doesn't feel like he's a guy with a much ambition. I can understand she's interested, like why with Frederick Vaughn, with Holman. These are people that are movers and shakers. That they have a desire to like shape the world in their own image, for better or worse. The master race and all that stuff. And I feel like Ben just does not give me that kind of vibe, and so I just don't understand like why she would be interested in someone like that. I could see him having like a sexual relationship, whatever, but like the way that the Soldier Boy talks about Stormfront, Clara, it makes me feel like there was a kinship, there was a romance, and I just don't see anything they have overlap beyond like Soldier Boy doesn't want to be an all powerful god or lead a power or like an army of superhumans. He just wants to get the glory, like sleep with women, do drugs, and that's it. That's his lot in life, and that's like Homelander's critique of Soldier Boy. You're immortal, and you wasted that immortality.
All right, we have John Kelly in the comments here. Well, Dr. John von Kelling says, I think it's because Soldier Boy was considered the strongest soup until Homelander entered in the public view. Clara was a Nazi and above all a supremacist in the most literal sense, thanks to the V1.
I don't know. It's like I feel like that's too surface level for Stormfront to be just into the most powerful person on there. Because I don't know. Like, would you say Frederick Law was the most powerful? Like, I think
He is the man who made the superheroes, so
yeah,
it was
like
intellectually, technically he was the strongest guy for a moment.
well, it's not much. I think strength is like I think power is more about. I think power like people who like being attracted to powerful people is less about them having power in themselves, but the drive to get that power, maintain it, and even seek more power. I think that's kind of like Frederick Wall made a serum to bring this new superior race and then change the fabric of the world. And Homelander is a person whose presence like changes geopolitics or shit or like media attention, all that. It's like it's not enough to just have power; you have to wield it. And I just don't. And I feel like that's the whole point for Ricard to be like she's interested in men who have the power and can use it and will use it. Whereas for me, it's like Soldier Boy, just him having power. I just don't know. Like for me, I don't know. Maybe this is me reading into Stormfront in a particular way. I feel like she doesn't admire power for the sake of power. She admires men who have power who use that power to their own ends. Um, yeah, I get John Kelling's point that like, yeah, she's a Nazi. So like whether it be super like there were not a lot of Nazis, but like I think that's the whole thing of Stormfront's characters that like the whole thing about like the white genocide or whatever. It's like she clearly is like an ideologue. She's not someone that just likes, you know, like strength, power, and like status first for the sake of it. They're a means to an end, and I just don't see her seeing Ben as utilizing those things as an end beyond himself. But nah. I think I'm just kind of I've just being a dead horse at this point, so we could just move on to sort of whatever else you want to discuss about for the season.
Yeah. So look, I guess long and short of it, I mean, look, I like the way Ackles is playing it. I like how he's just, you're seeing him just kind of size up, Homelander, giving them a lot more scenes together. I think was a good call this season. Just like for like, the little moments of like Homelander trying to impress his dad by, like I had the president of the United States make my father, who was Soldier Boy of old, like as patriotic as he gets, made him a drink, and I don't know, the little things, which obviously it's just falling flat every time, but it's these little, it's like seeing kind of like the character, like the flaws in Homelander's psyche of just desperately trying to make a connection, seeing it flounder, and one could argue that as his attempts to make a connection fail, that's what's having him double down on the whole godhood thing, where it's basically if his father's love isn't coming through, it's all in a sense you could say like Soldier Boy's with Soldier Boy bruising Homelander's ego, coupled with the jealousy, perhaps the latent jealousy of his father's immortality with the V1 that he finds out about. It feeds into that lust for power that Homelander has, or that jealousy. And the godhood is like if you're a god, everyone loves you blindly, no matter what, which is kind of the track that he was on. It's like the all-encompassing version of that. But again, he mistakes fear for respect and awe, which that's kind of it. But it's like maybe if Soldier Boy had been nicer to him, had like made an attempt instead of just trying to like get rid of him and like just resent him at every turn up front, things could have gone differently for him. Maybe he wouldn't have gone so delusional, had he again like at Homelander. I think fundamentally something they really tried to drive home this season is hopefully will bridge some other stuff. Fundamentally, it seems like choices were important, and characters like the Deep, for example, and like Butcher, like all these little not per se like a telltale choice, but had Butcher handled Ryan differently, perhaps things could have gone more swimmingly there. Like Ryan, he's caught between two fathers who hurt him deeply in different ways. Butcher reconnects with him, but he's very transparent that he's using him, and with no virus to kind of basically using him as a delivery mechanism for the virus. He challenges Homelander, which ends up with a very brutal beatdown from Homelander, which is sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, I mean, certain characters again, we keep having like these crossroad choices. Like I think the Deep's fate ultimately, like Firecracker and the Deep, I think were really good examples. Like to me, let me frame it like this. One of my favorite episodes this season, the episode I really liked, was the episode called One Shots. It was kind of this vaguely Rashomon, mostly just kind of a vignetted episode. We kind of tracked the characters, and the stories kind of lined up for the most part, as like what they were doing on the specific day. And it was just kind of this great kind of vignetted kind of, we kind of explore each character and kind of what they're going on. It was kind of disconnected from, moved the plot forward, but it was mostly just kind of like a character based episode. And it just felt, I really liked it. And we keep seeing, we kind of saw like these tough choices that were being made by certain characters, like Firecracker. She'd been very loyal to Homelander up to this point, and still loyal to the end. But it's the fact that Homelander's asking her to go completely contrary to her faith. Her whole thing is just kind of religious bigot, kind of like Alex Jones on steroids, kind of a thing that she's going for here. She's like her whole purpose is we've shown the whole purpose of everything we do with Firecracker is to show just how far gone and scary Homelander has become now. She had to destroy like the Reverend that meant a lot to her in her community growing up and her own life. And I thought it was a really good scene for Firecracker. She had to do her her manipulative media takedown thing on the person that you cared about. And it was a really great scene, just seeing her kind of like, seeing the pain behind like, her doing her usual thing, but now knowing, like this is what it feels like. I think we had great comeuppances for certain characters. I think Firecracker had great comeuppance in that moment. Mm-hmm. Like, this is what you've been doing to everyone, when you're like doing all the horrible season 4 stuff you did. This is what it feels like. And again, her religious belief, it basically choosing between her religious beliefs or Homelander, like which again is a crazy thing. And she's pretty much been replaced by O-Father. O-Father's like waiting in line for a job. Which, by the way, David Diggs, I had a little experience with him in some appearances here and there for Disney that he's done. Like, he was in the I forget which Muppets thing he was on. But I remember that was the last thing I saw him on. But it was kind of neat to just kind of see him pop up and actually let him sing.
I will say, as with how many criticisms I have this show of the season, especially David Diggs as All-Father is one of the highlights of the
season. He was fun, right?
That character was written well for what the status quo of the show was, and it felt to me that David Diggs didn't play this character as a caricature or just a flat. Like there was a lot of depth and complexity to that character and performance, and it reminded me a lot like of whenever religion was dealt. For as much as people talk about Ezekiel, like I think the show, when they're dealt with religion, dealt it in a very mature, nuanced way. And I think how All-Father operated was very interesting. And there's a lot to kind of delve into. Like, what is a person who is sincere about spreading the faith and gospel? How do they, square that peg with having to transition to idolatry of a superhero?
Yeah, what was it? The first was the Democratic Church of America. Is that what they were called? Yeah. So again, he's taking all these big swings that are contrary to kind of again religion. The whole idea is like it doesn't really change ultimately. It's just kind of like it's a big written it's the big written Bible that we're pretty much maybe thumping is the wrong word, but essentially it's like it's the book that we're kind of sticking with, and we're kind of finding ways to sell in interesting ways.
Mhm.
But again, this is like a big thing. Oh, you're going to sell the new and improved Homelander version of the Bible, which you're going to write, which is feel. Oh my god, I don't have. Like, yeah, it's like this whole thing of like how do we? I have to adapt like the Bible to Homelander and like be the guy, the arbiter of that. And it's like, the one of the best scenes with Allfather I felt in the show was when he was on the phone with Homelander, like they're doing like the focus group testing with like the psychics and everything. And basically, the psychics can like snuff out like if anyone's or the hard cells in the room for like if Homelander is God, which is insane. I kind of love that idea. It's twisted, but it kind of makes the diluted sense for what Homelander is going for. I love Oh Father. He genuinely he didn't want these people to die, and he was like pleading like like I know I can change them. They're gonna be hard cells, but I can change them. His Homelander shot that down. I really expected. I kind of wish they went this way. I kind of how would you have felt if Oh Father had to pull the trigger himself in that moment? Do you think that would have made that seem more interesting, or do you think it would have been complicated things like to have him do that when clearly he needs to be kind of stopped in the moment, all that kind of?
Pull the trigger on what exactly?
Well, I mean, in the room, like with the non-believers, so to speak, like if Homelander was giving him the order, and I was expecting him to have to use his power to like blow everyone's head up or whatever with like Sonic, with the Sonic voice ability.
Oh, the Sonic Stream. If like
Yeah, the Sonic Scream. Like I was expecting him to have to kill that
up.
room full of people himself instead of like the like the more brutal, more budget effective way of doing it. I guess with like two soups that can fight people and just brutally murder them by hand.
I mean, I think either way, I mean, Allfather still carries the sins of
Yeah,
leading you to the slaughter. So whether he himself is the one to do it versus others doing it, like he still is aware and can observe all that's happening. So I don't know if it would have made a difference either way. I think it would have been interesting, like on a scene level, if like Allfather just to kind of alleviate the nerves, like leads the non-believers into like a Heim singing, like just to kind of establish some level of connection, and then when he hits the high note, then that's when he kills them all. That would have been really cool. Like he's kind of lulling them into their death. That would have been a really cool way to do such a scene if Elfald was the one that had to kill the non-believers. But I think either like in terms of moral culpability and guilt, like I think it's all the same whether he's the one that's directly killing them or this is enabling and leaving the others to do it for him.
I love the Terror POV episode. I thought that was really funny. How did you feel about the whole? It was silly, but like Terror is trained to hump the Homelander doll, and his hallucinations. Anthony Starr like dangling like a chicken leg. Just
Yeah, that was a funny moment.
but in general, I like that they kind of bond like Huey and Butcher. They save the dog, and it kind of like brought out the humanity and Butcher and the reminder of like the steakhouse promise they made to each other. Like I don't know, kind of like I kind of bought it as like Homelander. Sorry, but Butcher doesn't have much, and Butcher has it has Terror the dog, and it's just kind of like these. It's kind of like it's pulling back to like the whole like Huey is kind of Lenny kind of thing, which we really hit on by the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. Some other like kind of choice moments here. So Black Noir and the Deeps thing. The whole thing where they have this falling out over the Deep stealing credit for the capture of Stan Edgar. Which, by the way, I love Anthony Starr in the way he just like he's so he has that crap eating grin when he has Stan Edgar finally. And me again, my favorite character in The Boys was Stan Edgar for like what we did with him in season 2. Man, I love like the whole you're simply bad product. Like you think we're not a superhero company, we're a pharmaceutical company. It's this whole John Carlo, they used them so sparingly. When they used them so well. Like the only man who stood up to Homelander and actually was not intimidated, and actually the Homelander was intimidated by. He had no powers. Like I loved it. And we actually kind of pay off that scene here where we have, so again, with the whole fatherhood and the father figures thing we're doing this season in places, Stan Edgar, he's imprisoned, and Homelander and Soldier Boy, they visit him, and it's this thing where he kind of calls out the whole, he kind of calls out, the Homelander's like he's always been looking for father figures, and he finally has his father and everything there, and still, equally pathetic.
Yeah, now that I definitely agree on that one.
Yeah. Let's see. But also, again, I like that Stan Edgar did, like, despite the strong front that he pulls on. I mean, it's not even a front. It's like, despite, it's the character that he has. I mean, he still plans his whole plan to kind of run Vought again. Which I love that scene with MM that he has too, where basically he spells, like, he shows that he had respect for MM's father and everything that they did trying to go after the company, but he makes it very clear that, oh yeah, I'm going to be running that company again, and basically you and I will be enemies.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And then at the end of the show, it's like, oh, we're just Emma is just kind of just chilling.
but yeah, maybe he decided to let it go after everything though. I mean, is that
But man, that just kind if you want to get to that particular ending for
because he
the
would have killed himself like his father if he just kept going after one on one. Maybe like Stan Edgar, like if that guy
like,
can rise
like
and get back in the company, it's like maybe there is no hope.
and then at that okay, then okay, so now we just started from a point where hey, the morals messed up. We're time to burn things down and make a difference. And like, oh, never mind. We just kind of clean out the worst excesses of that system and then just keep the system rolling.
I don't know. I'm just saying that we had a thing where MM was we saw him completely abandon hope in the like he's not obsessive compulsive anymore. He's like eating stuff off the ground. It's he's very because he's resigned himself to there's no hope, there's no going back to my family. It's just kind of death. After everything he goes through, after it's just seeing things to the brink, and then just them failing to to prevent Homelander from achieving the godhood and everything, is all of that. Just things going the way they went, things going as nearly bad as they went. I think it may put things in perspective for him. I mean, he took in Ryan. I don't know. It feels like MM has kind of decided. I mean, look, it's not written yet. And obviously, there was kind of a thing that suggests perhaps they would regroup. Under Huey's purview, perhaps, and that would maybe bring him back in the fold for that sort of thing. Obviously, we don't really spell that out. We don't really say that's where it's going. But if you just take it at face value, it just feels like he's rededicating himself to his family. And he's I don't know. It feels like he's just kind of like I'm not gonna like torture myself like my father did. I'm gonna choose to be happy.
I mean, that doesn't feel like that's really made clear in the text. It feels like, oh, you defeated Homelander and Butcher dies, and I'm just basically will take in Ryan as my adopted son and they get remarried to Monique, and that's pretty much it. It's like,
Yeah.
but that okay, this is the thing that I kind of want to bring up. It's like with Homelander's death and with the remaining time, and then but like I kind of wish the show was structured in the way where Homelander was killed earlier in the show's run or middle of the show's run. Soldier Boy was the big bad for a season. He gets killed off, and then or like it just feels Butcher should have been a main bad for the final season of the show. I think in retrospect, the show should have been structured in a way where Homelander and Soldier Boy had their times being the big bad or whatever, and maybe Homelander gets depowered, or like you could have in the show like there's just something where Homelander just being his powerful self, never being depowered or humbled or anything. It just feels like he just run its course. And Butcher, who could be a very interesting antagonist for the boys, and you could have like a boys civil war or whatever, be the final season, and really go to the core crux of it all. Can superheroes be allowed to exist in this universe, and should they be allowed to exist? That whole dynamic and conflict, that just is kind of dealt with in a way that really, I think this show would have really run forward in the momentum of, hey, we have these good heroes and we have a lot of bad heroes. Can we trust that more good heroes will come out, or we'd accept that that's just the cost of giving people these powers and that back and forth? There could have been a whole entire season focused on that dialogue, that debate, the whole necessity of heroes existing, and all that stuff. But no, we just have Butcher and Huey have their one on one, and it just feels like the show, yes, like it started with Huey and Butcher, but the other boys came in. They have their damage, they have their flosses, they have their hangups, and I felt like that should have been. It shouldn't just been that scene shouldn't have been just Huey and Butcher. It should have also had, and then any, Kimiko. Like there, it just felt so isolated. It felt so, you know, just this kind of a weird epilogue, and I don't know. I feel like the show just was not comfortable in going to the nth degree of, should Wa be burned down the ground, and now Wa just kind of exists, and the system just kind of, it's a Homelander-less world, but the world still has its flaws, and brushing things under the rug, and that's even going to the fact that like the Gen V kids were just kind of put on the bench as well. So
Okay, so that was a problem. The fact that we was completely the fact we had like a 2-season show, and the whole point was like, hey, they're going to be in the main conflict. Not really.
you might as well know how Gen V exists. You could
Exactly. It was that one did really bother me. The whole Marie Moreau thing. It felt like we should have.
If you're wanting to complicate the whole idea of like all troops should burn to the ground, they should exist. Like people like Marie, Emma, like all the Gen V people, they could have been the next generation of heroes to give hope, and that would have made it so interesting for Butcher to have to consider. Should I be killing off these sweepers when there's these kids who are genuinely optimistic and could do good in the world?
Mm-hmm.
And am I robbing the world a chance to be gifted by these?
Instead, the girl with the crows got more screen time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was definitely egg on the face on that one. Yeah. So I mean, there's a few highlights I wanted to throw out there. So again, I mean, like Deep in Black Noir's whole thing is the idea of this falling out of steel and crate over the capture of Stan Edgar, and they kind of, it's tit for tat. He kills the PJ Byrne director character Adam Bjork, which the way I read that season, I feel that Adam Bjork actually did become a good person, like through the arts, through the creators. By the end there, like, he actually believed in Black Noir.
I mean, he was relegated to the theater because he was B2'd, right? Like
yeah, exactly. That's the gag there. So I think so that is the gag, and I think that he genuinely founded like kind of a second coming in the theater. It was like, he actually, he believes in the craft, and I think I think it's humbled him in the right way. So he actually had this optimistic kind of arc, and then Deep just kills him in the back. He shoves an eel up his butt.
No, it's not a needle. It's like a octopus tentacle.
Was this no? That's what we did to the Deep, more or less. I'm talking like with the PJ Byrne character. Like, it was like a sturgeon, or it was like like, you remember, like, the Black Noir removed it, so I think it was like an eel or something.
Yeah, something like that. And yeah, right. And also, like, man, the new Black Noir, it was interesting.
A lot of people this season really thought, for a moment I considered it, a lot of people, so in the comic, the whole thing, Black Noir.
Yeah, that like he's actually the clone of Homelander and all that.
A lot of people thought for a moment Black Noir wasn't talking. Like, could we have switched them out a third time? Could it be, could that be the Homelander clone?
Honestly, in retrospect, I feel like this show would have been much interesting if they had Black Noir be a clone of Homelander, because I think then it would have made some interesting psychological depth that the only person he feels the closest to is literally himself.
It would have been kind of sad when you think about it. It would have been.
I mean, it's sad, but like that Homelander, character. But I think it would have been really interesting to really,
No, not that. I'm saying it would have been sad if you think, like, the Superman movie, has Ultraman looks identical to Black Noir.
Oh, I know, Bizarro. I mean,
like, that would have been that would have been sad if they like, oh man, like Superman beat him to it.
Yeah, but I think it's like, because then,
look, you're right. There is an argument. Here's the thing: the Black Noir Homelander clone thing from the comics. It's interesting the way it actually, basically, we have the White House encounter, more or less, and we have it takes place in the Oval Office, and it gets on like the front lawn of the White House. It takes pretty much place the same place. But we don't reveal it until then. Is the thing, from what I understand, we don't really reveal it until that point, at the very end, and it's the idea that we did this whole. It was kind of like the Arkham City Joker thing to a degree, where it's like, but maybe with more consequences. The idea that both of them were in play, but like all the horrible stuff was actually the Black Noir Homelander. But I guess you could play the ambiguity up with that. It's the idea that the main the real Homelander was was very much like, why does Butcher have it out for me this much? And this is way he was interacting with them. And then we reveal like he said I genuinely have no idea. Like I never raped your wife. I don't know what you're talking about. Like I genuinely don't know you. Why would I lie to you? I'm the most powerful being on the earth. And then we reveal like Black Noir is that, and then this messy fight happened, yada yada. The point being, it was like a reveal that in the course of the show you could never really do the same way because of what we did with Noir and that we made it Irving. We made it like the original. Like the one who had the history of Soldier Boy. Mm-hmm. Because of that, we can never really, we can never make the Homelander thing. Where you're not wrong, though. It is interesting. It is a thing. It requires some fine tuning to make it play a little less convoluted, a little more like we're taking all the blame off of like the main Homelander thing. Is kind of it was a very last minute thing in the comics. Like this whole time, it was that guy. It was a clone, at the very end. But you're right, though. The whole Homelander did get along in Noir. Now, let me ask you saw the Diabolical short, right? We've talked about it.
Yeah, I did.
I love that Diabolical short, like how the friendship in Noir started, and it would lend credence to that to a degree,
Yeah, and I guess it's like it would kind of give a little bit more of an ego boost to Homelander for like the way like he was kind of self-made in terms of his superhero prowess and success. Like literally a clone of him taught like he himself was the only one that could teach himself to be the hero that he thinks himself to be.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of feeds into that arrogance and like superiority complex. So yeah, I just think with what it is, it's like it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird that like we now have two separate different superhero shows that have a black actor in universe play a superhero.
Well, wait, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, like we have the second Black Noir, and then we have Simon Williams, Wonder Man.
Oh, okay.
No, it's just interesting, like because like literally, like it's not like.
Oh, you mean actor superhero?
Yeah,
okay. I got you now.
Very
okay.
much into their crafts. It's kind of interesting, like I don't know, but like, it's like the opposite of parallel thinking, but just kind of interesting to have those two characters exist the way they are.
I got you now. When you said acting, I thought you meant literally playing. I didn't
no,
think like literally acting.
Universe, okay. Black actors who are very into their craft.
Yeah.
To become superheroes or have
yeah. Let's see, but yes, ultimately, he gets his revenge on the Deep by busting that pipeline. Which again, so this is where I'm with the Deep. So the Deep, he's throughout the course of the whole series, he's made these very selfish, very stupid, very short-sighted decisions. He's had the opportunity to do the right thing constantly. Never, he never stuck with it. He turned on everyone who was nice to him. He ignored his conscience, which essentially was the Patton Oswalt gills. Never listened to him. He Homelander wanted him to basically hype up like the pipeline as like an environmentally sound thing, which of course doomed the ocean. Which then when Black Noir busted that oil pipeline, I love the idea that he's had such this intimate, sick and wrong relationship with the sea life and friendships with the sea life, and you have Sam Jackson as like I think it's a shark, right?
Yeah, Sam
like,
Jackson.
If Sam Jackson's a shark, tell him like his ocean privileges are revoked. He's and if he steps a toe in the ocean, he's going to get killed. And we have that really funny scene where dark funny scene where like a guy's drowning and it's like the Deep just he's clearly in view. It's like, well, what go in the water, man, save him. What's wrong with you? Like honestly, that. What the boys start out to be, that feels like a tailor-made scene for the boys to an extent. Just the idea that he in the public view, he should he should be able to save this guy, but if obviously he can't, then it's just an embarrassment of riches. It's almost like the whole like, hey trainer, are you going to teach me can you teach me to outrun cancer kind of a joke,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of which, so in contrast to the Deep, for a moment here. So again, the Deep again, he made all the wrong choices, and Starlight has this encounter with him on the beach, which is like the final. Like, come on, man, you're terrified of Homelander. He screwed you over at every opportunity. He's told you to your face he doesn't like you. Just like, come on, just stop fighting me on this already. And just he refused till the end and got killed by the sea life. Flip side, A Train. He had a very good death, I think, at the start of the show.
Yeah.
I love that. In his last moments, he was acting. He had a really nice scene with his brother, and he had a nice scene with his brother in which he was kind of like, he said he was proud of him, and all this stuff, despite all the hardships, kind of put his family through. He's proud that he was finally doing the right thing, and even though it was like contrary to the endorsement deals and everything, and and just like his last moments is the fact that he avoids running into somebody. He's thinking about other people. He calls Homelander out, and he's kind of like, it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing, where he's calling Homelander out, but it's also like the chink in the armor that gets him to thaw out Soldier Boy. So it all, it's very muddied, but still, it was a good fate for A Train that it really kind of set Homelander off kilter.
I honestly really, I think for whatever issues and faults I have with the run of the show, A Train was one of the consistent like through lines that never had a false no. Jesse Usher put in a really great performance as A Train, and the writing for the character really made him a nuanced, fascinating character. And so the way he began, the way he ended is just gets like no notes. So
I mean, what impresses me about A Train is like A Train foundationally for me in the boys. My enjoyment and the hook for the boys was I hated A Train, and that was the challenge. Like, how can we get you from hating A Train to really liking him by the end?
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean hate him like in terms of like the performance, or I mean hate him because he ran through Robin. That was like the hook of the show. I have to see what happens next. That's your opening. Like this, a speedster runs through a lady and he doesn't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't think he did anything wrong. Like that's your almost Incredibles like a logical logic of a world of superheroes kind of issue there. It's like it was a great payoff to that. But yeah, so the redemption arc and the grand scale saying here, yeah, it worked well.
Yeah.
Right. So let's see. Okay, so point being, that's kind of the choices that are made here. With the fatherhood thing too, I want to mention. I love that. As far as our pacing goes, it felt unnecessary, but I enjoyed seeing Starlight, kind of reconnect with her father, and her father being played by the wonderful Tim Daly.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think Tim Daly did a good job. And again, I like that, as I kind of pointed out with, Soldier Boy and, Homelander, kind of seeing kind of the genes being passed down, seeing kind of like the Freudian things, if you will. I like seeing that, we kind of see why Annie would be attracted to Huey, because she's attracted to genuinely, kind of good people, as we see with her father there.
Yeah.
Kind of like the bleeding hearts in a good way. It's.
No, I really appreciate Tim Daly was a solid surprise as Annie's dad. I could definitely see like where Annie gets her morals and like sense of responsibility from.
Yeah. So we had a really great another cameo. We had a really great returning guest star in, I believe, our penultimate episode. Kessler. So we had Jeffrey Dean Morgan coming back as Kessler. It basically had like kind of a psychic, kind of projecting Kessler's appearance to Huey and Butcher, and kind of taunting them about how Butcher treats his allies. And I thought this was a really good scene that kind of facilitated the foreshadowed the ending. We're gonna kind of set up the whole like I'll drag your body across the bloody finish line, and the whole the top of the steakhouse kind of like kind of promise between them. And I don't know, it was I thought we used Kessler pretty well there, as a way of like just kind of reminding us that okay, Butcher will probably make some very again, if we're going to face, if choices is kind of a thing of the season, Butcher's going to be definitely an arbiter of that, and Huey's going to have to make a decision. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, I want to talk about my favorite thing in the whole season, okay? Easily my favorite thing. The Legend.
Yeah, the Legend was great in this season.
Yeah. So Paul Reiser, and I believe we introduced him in season 3. I always liked the legend. I like Paul Reiser, and I think this seems like the best scene we could have given him. So we use him for the whole fraud. Yes, for the kind of unnecessary the whole Golden Geisha plot line, but the important thing is afterwards. I he has one of the best scenes in the show, and of course the legend, the idea of the legend, he's been basically a parody of Stanley, the way we have applied. Basically, what if Stanley was skeezier than we, you know, than we are used to. Like what if you were, skeezy opposed to what we, the beloved. But again, what if he had like this, the kind of the charm and charisma of Stanley, but just what if he had, like was maybe like the worst side of Hugh Hefner?
Honestly, with what we know of Hugh Hefner's background, I feel like the legend's a much more upstanding guy than Hugh Hefner.
Well, probably. I'm not going to split hairs on Hugh Hefner. You're probably right, but anyway, I don't know as much about Hugh Hefner, but regardless. Point being, we have this great scene where Homelander is like he's taken him to the hideout and everything, and obviously it's all cleared out. So seemingly he's got Bupkis. He finds out that Sage is in league with him based on the Taco Bell receipt. Taco Bell being her undoing was really good, by the way. um, he calls. He's the only one who had the scruples to call Homelander out. Like the only person who's not the only human person that's like not afraid of him. Obviously Butcher's not afraid. But just the point being, the only person like that is like a civilian is not afraid of him and offers him words of like genuine encouragement and praise that he's desperately like longed to hear. Like I just loved like the bit where he says, Nick, wait, so you're not afraid of me? You're not afraid of me, are you? This is like you. No, I feel for you, kid. I mean, you're an effing maniac. You're effing psycho. But that's just talent, kid. Like I love the whole that's just talent. Like he's willing to accept his fate. He knows I'm not walking out of here. He's pretty much seen the show. He knows what's gonna happen. But just this great moment of like just seeing Anthony Starr just play this scene and just see him like the way he reacts when he like touches his shoulder and he's like having this whole god complex thing. Like this guy, he's like, no one's ever talked to me like this before. And just the fact that he spares him that way. I like you can read it. Like it's not purely that he's been touched by the words of the legend. I like to read it that way. I think it's a mixture of both here. The legend, in his little speech here, he kind of mentions the Vault Alert necklace that Golden Geisha has, which basically is the lead that Homelander needs. So it gives him exactly the lead that he needs. It's going to take him where he needs to go. But I think that coupled with, just the genuine like human is attention and just like human this kind of affection that he's looking for here, just to any degree. I think that's why he spares him. It's just that combination of he was useful, and I kind of respect his forthrightness and his honesty, and the fact he's not terrified of me. And it's like just go, no words. And look at that. He leaves. Firecracker. He kind of allotted her like a similar thing. The woman breastfed me. I'll let her go. Like just collect your things and get out. But she then speechified to him. She overstood the welcome, and then dead. Legend, he was smarter than her. He left. He left when he had the opportunity.
Yeah.
But perfect scene. Just a great scene in The Boys. Just very layered, well performed by both actors. Just no notes. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So, see, ultimately, again, like Soldier Boys, again, I want to mention, too, my favorite part of, my favorite element of that, of the one-shots episode. I really like Soldier Boy's story in that. I love the idea of, yes, there is the obvious draw. We have our supernatural reunion, which is great. We have Jensen Ackles, we have Padalecki, and we have Misha Collins. They're all there. But I just love the idea. We visit Mr. Marathon, the kind of the disgraced speedster, who basically went the way of A Train if he didn't put up a fight to get back in. And I just really love it. One, it just kind of looks at the absurdity of like we have all the celebrity self parodies, including Seth Rogen, who's the producer of the show. He's just there, and it's just this crazy sequence. Which is, but this is what I'm looking for. Like, how do we step up like the brutality and the violence, and just without it, just feeling like rinse and repeat, just being numb to it. Like this is like kind of a fun way of doing it, where it's like, Soldier Boy. I just really like the way the scene plays out with like Jensen Ackles and just the way he like we actually have gotten the drop on Homelander. There's no reason why he shouldn't kill him, but except for the fact that he's felt the sympathy. It's the enigma of like how Soldier Boy feels about Homelander, in which he has every reason to hate this guy. He clearly doesn't like him, but for how Clara felt about him, and for just like I really think seeing that I'm responsible for this guy and all his problems to some degree. There's like some inkling. Again, it's not really fully sympathy, it's not really empathy, but it's some hint of like a feeling that he's never felt before. Is that he's my idiot son, and it kind of boils down to the hilariously delivered, the whole like, yeah, he is an asexual weirdo, but he is my asexual weirdo, and like no one f's my son but me. Like what? That came out wrong. I don't. It's just really funny the way it just kind of plays out, and just the fact that he does. There is some care and concern for Homeland despite all the issues that they have. I don't know. I just really like that played out and all that. So it's just, it's a fun kind of highlight, which then facilitates the whole, like him giving him the V1 to complete, with basically honor, Stormfront.
No, I think it's. I think what's interesting about for this season is that when I look at the long view of it, it's that is it kind of weird to you that like for as much as people say like Homelander has like a pronounced influence, on superhero community, you don't really see as many heroes like kind of being sort of the regime soldiers. There's very few heroes that are kind of like doing any sort of dirty work with Homelander.
Well, that's true, but a lot of them are like on the like they're always going to report to Homelander. Like we had like one of the shift like the one of the psychic guys who they caught him at the O-Father like rehearsal. Like that guy's like we're going to report to Homelander. That's pretty much as far as it goes, though.
Another thing I want to highlight, how Frenchie's end for the show, I think was well done. Although I'm not the biggest fan for how much of his eulogy just had asshole stuff in there that I think it could have done a little less on.
I'm sorry, what?
No, like
Oh, right, the eulogy. That okay, that's what you.
Yeah. I think that just really that's I think is an example of like too much humor undercutting the drama of the moment.
Right. Yeah, it was a little weird.
And
I mean, his death itself, though, was pretty, cool.
No, it was well done, and I think just the eulogy, the funeral part was just kind of
yeah.
I that felt very much more of the boys the comic than even the worst parts of the show. But along the same lines, like Kimiko, I was weird. I did not.
How did you feel turning her into like the Deus Ex Machina? How did you feel about that?
I mean, because the thing is, with what happens after Homelander, it's like, okay, why isn't there just an effort to just think about like, hey, for any heroes that get out of line, just take their powers and then put them in normal jail, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that she just she has the power to eliminate all soups, but then she just kind of goes off to Paris and remembers Frenchie's memory. And this is the second time a love interest in a superhero project absconds off to Paris.
Mm.
But without her man.
Yeah. Well, you gotta remember too. I mean, even if like with that logic, though, Rohit, it's like they could take away all the powers and put them away, but or kill them. But regardless, they could just the bad ones. Command V's around, and Ball is just like producing like crazy, so they could always just
and at that point, then like maybe it could have been a two-pronged operation where you destroy all the Compound V, and then for the heroes that had Compound V in their systems, you just take away their powers and then just burn the system to the ground. But I don't know, just feel like the show, and in light of it being on Amazon, a company that is extremely powerful, that has a lot of influence,
Oh, did you hear that Musk was like really upset about that?
I mean, I'm not surprised, but ultimately, it just feel like whenever the show goes into direct parallel, it just becomes hackneyed. It reminds me a lot of how Supergirl can be really hackneyed with its political commentary. The episode where it's like, nevertheless, she persisted, and it's like, okay, this is just it feels. I feel like a lot of the writers on the show, or at least Eric Kirby, is a little bit too chronically online with like political Twitter or whatever, and it's just like, I know like the people he follows, I know the things that he's like making jokes reference to, and it's just kind of it's not, it doesn't make it for a more enriching experience. Like I don't feel like because I remember there was an interview about like how like Eric Kripke had pushback from Andy Starr for making Homelander too much of a Trump analogy, and I think like, and I feel like I appreciate Andy Starr pushing back because Homelander is not an analogy or equivalent to Trump or any other figure. He's a very unique type of character that at the end, his end, I think, works well with in line with his character. It reveals the pathetic nature of him ultimately. And so I just don't. So for me, it just I think the show when Homelander works, he works as an indictment on the system that allows such a person to exist. And then when he's at his weakest is when he just becomes like the end all be all. Like the show is not a traditional superhero show, and I think it failed because in the end because it became just a traditional superhero show with rated R violence and sex and language.
Yeah. So I mean, just with Homelander's fate, the showdown in the Oval Office. I mean, I think we dragged that like Himiko like blasting, Homelander. I mean, I think she should have kind of like a Scarlet Witch kind of moment of like you took everything from me. But I think we needed to have like the three-way fight for a little bit of like Butcher and Ryan and Homelander, I guess, mixing it up. So we needed like some reason to delay that. But anyway, um, there's something just very satisfying about the depowered Homelander after all the trouble that he's caused, and again the whole show being built on Butcher wants Homelander dead, which is seemingly an impossible thing, and it's taken all this to get to this point, and we just have his true self revealed, where he's just as pathetic as we've ever seen him, and just the turn on a dime. He's been like again, as godlike as he's ever been, and then this instant, you know, just sniveling again. He's every character flaw that we've had built into the guy, only without the power to make him scary. Just it was eerie to see him, see him that weak and pathetic and like on the world view. Just everyone's seeing this moment. He's threatening. He's offering Butcher anything he wants and sexual favors. It's crazy. Um, but yeah, just, Butcher's getting all his hits in for all the pain that he's caused and everything he's done to Becca and just this, and Frenchie and just the moment where I really love the fact that I know it's directly pulled from the comic, but it just felt just right that he used the crowbar to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was a satisfying death. Again, debatably one of the most satisfying deaths. Like this guy, he had it coming.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so we have like Butcher's End and then the end for the other characters.
So Butcher's End was like the one thing I did know, like pretty much from the comic, like as far as the ending goes. Like I forgot like how precisely the Homelander thing broke down. I knew that Black Noir was a Homelander clone, but I know that I started the show, and by the end though, I knew at some point we're gonna have like the way I recalled it was that like Butcher they were on a high place, and I thought Butcher like jumped to his demise, and I think maybe I don't know if he shot him in the comic, but essentially it was like he fell from a high place, and Huey had something to do with it because he put him in impossible. There was no, I don't think the virus was from the comic because that was like again Kripke pulling from like real world stuff, which he then applied to it. And if memory serves, there were in the comic they had like anti-suit missiles, which essentially was like I think it was that's what they had. It was like kind of a kryptonite equivalent. That was that was kind of the antithesis of Compound V, which was not a virus, but was something. Anyway, but yeah, so in the epilogue kind of era, like after the Homelander thing, it was basically the Butcher was planning. He was going up against everyone. He was just kind of really becoming a monster himself, which we come in building up. And yeah, just this moment of like the two of them having this confrontation. Which what bugs me about one thing that bugs me about this confrontation was the whole like, the semantics of like, well, he put it in the sprinkler system, and if Huey stops him, I mean, how does he get out of the sprinkler system? Like, do
Yeah.
you drain it? Is it like a even if like you drain, it's like in the water supply or something like that, like, or does it just go down the sewer? Like, what, like it's still in there. It's still out in the world now. Like, I don't know how he gets it out of there. I mean, like, do you dilute? Can you dilute a deadly virus?
No, it's
That's
really.
the thing. I don't know how you stop. I don't know how you undo that one.
Yeah, I think it's a virus that you just kind of hope to not get affected by.
That's the thing. So, admittedly, that did kind of. But I wish it was like a thing where like I don't know, he found a way like to. I honestly I don't know. I don't. Sprinkler system kind of makes sense, but also it's the thing where he'd be waiting for a long time for like for everyone to show up, so he knows he could like at least kill one suit. But I mean, you think they're all going to be back to work the next morning? Like they're going to form like the new seven? Like I don't know. So, admittedly, I had some quibbles there, but just the scene itself, in which like Butcher, he kind of they kind of mixed it up a little bit, and he kind of saw Lenny in his last months. I like the idea that Butcher he relented. Like I don't, it doesn't look like he was gonna. He couldn't bring himself to kill Huey. He couldn't bring himself to do that. He just not kill. I know he wasn't gonna kill Huey. Sorry, I just mean like I was thinking about the trigger. Like he was gonna relent and not pull the trigger. I really believe Huey actually got through him in those last moments.
Yeah, and I think it's between those two, it's a very touching scene. It's very much resonant with sort of these characters. I just wish we had a whole season of them being opposite sides, and then that because I think if the show started with them, the show should end with them and their journey. Them joining together at the beginning, and then them being apart.
Yeah, but that would have been such a hard sell, though.
I don't know if it would be that hard.
No, I mean Homelander was all the marketing. Like, we can't get rid of if we get rid of Homeland, people aren't going to stick around for what's next. Yeah, however, you're right though. We're still doing all these spin-offs, so I mean, there's kind of room for an argument there.
I think the show would have been better, like quality wise, had they killed off Homelander and had Butcher, because I think then it would have made the themes that were touched upon in the first season to really come to the forefront. And then
no, you're not wrong about that, but I can see them from a standpoint of like it would have been hard to sell, but with the show that they had made and how it had gone and just. But then again, we have spin-offs, so there's capital and there's like I think there's goodwill enough that they could have gotten away with it.
And then there's Vought Rising. There's whatever.
Talk of the Boys Mexico, which sounds stupid to me. Like, why would they still? Guys, we're doing too many. But that one was already having trouble getting off the ground in the first place.
Yeah, but like that's the thing. It's like the show had been compromised because it became just as much of a product as the in-show criticism of the MCU and DCU and all that. So it's like, I don't have too much sympathy for people that they chose to be a franchise.
Yeah, I just it's just in hindsight, it just feels like Gen V, given that it really had, aside from introducing the virus, it had no value, no probative value to the show, given how little the characters ended up doing in the main show. So we kind of wasted things on Gen V. Vought Rising, I mean, having watched the trailer, which is just a trailer, admittedly, it seems a little not as simple as I imagined it would be. So I hope they're not going to do that. I hope they're not going to convolute it too much, where it just feels like, let's see Soldier Boy in like the V1 generations, like era in the Boys universe. Like that's something that, okay, a brief one season prequel, like as an origin to things, that I think that has some, that's something you could add to enrich the universe, perhaps. If it's like simple one and done season, like kind of like a mini series kind of thing, that's interesting to me. That's something I could buy. Think about this, in The Boys. So The Boys, of course, has an ending, but years later they did like a little Becca like prequel story, which was nice.
Yeah, then now it's like look at it this way. Let's see.
I'm just saying, it's like just in premise, like the boys can have an ending and can revisit stuff, but tastefully.
But think of it this way. So, like if you look at say Supernatural and its spinoffs, it's like maybe 15 to 20 seasons total. Think of like right now, you have 7 seasons, I guess 8 seasons to count Diabolical of boys content. And depending on how many seasons is the Boys Mexico Bot Rising.
At this juncture, I would say they might cut their losses at 1, given that people are split on this season. So I imagine 1 season per.
I don't know, man. Like Amazon is wanting to I feel like The Boys is going to be The Walking Dead. Well, The Boys is becoming it will become to Amazon Prime what The Walking Dead was to AMC. It's a franchise with multiple spinoffs and are you really going to be surprised when Bot Rising gets gets greenlit for a second or third season?
Okay, admittedly, if it gets a second season, it's based on people like Jensen Ackles.
I mean, that's the whole reason. Jensen that's all. Bot Rising is just Eric Krieger's. I miss Jensen Ackles, and he has his own show. And I would not be surprised if that show does some stuff that breaks the continuity of The Boys, or Gen V. But
all right, so real quick, few comments I want to shout out, and then we'll kind of round out our ending here. So Teddy says, I think it was a good idea. Just think it could have been done better. Maybe having the fight be longer would work better for me.
The Homelander fight, yeah.
Says also he doesn't blame Huey for killing him because he knew he didn't give Huey much of a choice. Yeah, that's the thing. I like that Homeland, like the Butcher, the Butcher saw the. He didn't want him to feel guilty about it. I think honestly, I kind of viewed it as he kind of lied in his last moments, like a kind lie to him, where it's like, hey, I was gonna do it. I didn't give him much of a choice. That was kind of like taking the burden off him. Where I really think the way it plays that Huey got through to him. He wasn't going to do it, but it was too late. But in his last moments, he wanted to give Huey peace of mind that no, I was going to do it.
I think he was going to do it because honestly,
you think he was going to do it?
Yeah, it's consistent with what he.
No, it's consistent, but otherwise, why show him not relenting from the trigger then?
I mean, because there is a bit of humanity to him, but relenting doesn't mean he was going to commit. You can have characters relent in their decision, but the decision they make, it's very much consistent with their overall character. William Butcher is consistently anti-soup. He does not believe superheroes should exist.
Yeah.
And that's part of what animates his conflicting feelings about Ryan. That's part of the interesting dynamic with him and Maeve in season 3. That's part of his self-loathing when he becomes a soup in himself in some of the seasons. If Butcher relented and then just decided not to do it, it would be a betrayal of what the character is. This man hates soups, and he's a monster that is helpful in beating out other monsters.
Yep. All right. So one last. So I like our full circle. I like the full circle ending we have, where one. Jim Beaver back as Bobby Singer's president. It's good old Jim Beaver. If we're gonna have I really was wondering what happened to that guy because I knew he didn't get killed, but obviously everything had happened and he elected the other guy president before we popped his head.
If he's blamed as a traitor, it's surprising that he just didn't get executed.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But I think the ending for the boys' characters is very hokey.
But I thought Huey's, the whole Huey and Starlight thing. He opens the cables, the cable.
And he names his daughter Robin.
Yeah,
that's so Harry Potter.
Oh, come on, that was nice.
It is so it's
what's wrong with hokey? It's such a cynical. Come on, man, so many bad cynical things happen.
If you here's the thing. If you told me that scene, like it, like you like showed it in a tweet, it's like, oh, like someone's like making like a parody like point about like what the ending could be, but it's like just shit posting. But like the fact that this actual ending was just kind of like that's something I would see in a in-universe VOTCU movie or show. I think that was really hokey. I think everything else, it's like, you know, I guess Huey and Starlight think that they can be a much like they just operate as vigilantes or not under VOT. Like I just guess I'm just trying to like how they can operate without like any sort of like because the whole thing for all the metahumans or heroes that are operating, they're under VOT's control and the VOT, has deals with the police and law enforcement and all that. But like these are people that are specifically unaffiliated with VOT.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're I just feel like just considering how everything's all planned and the bureaucracy of it all, I just cannot imagine that they can just operate as vigilantes, freely. Especially they get public identities, right? So
I mean, I don't know. I thought maybe they got a lot of goodwill after the public completely turned on Homelanders. Okay, maybe the Starlighters were right. So no longer someone we're gonna have to hunt down, and again, I would like to think optimistically. People are kind of seeing that
the thing is, VOD is in control. Like VOD is still in power.
Yeah,
it's crazy to me that VOD doesn't try to like. Obviously it can go directly after Starlight.
There's got to be some gratitude from Stan Edgar that he's not going to lean heavy on them. They're actually saving people. It's not as bad for business.
No, but the thing is, like any January specifically, like as opposed to like what Stan is doing and all that stuff, like in principle of it. So it just for me, it's just crazy that they can operate out in the open without any sort of like overhanded like bureaucratic like regulations or like because they would like that's the thing. Like if VOT's in control, why doesn't VOT control the opposition of like the remaining boys? Like he's retired. Kimiko is off in France. So really, the only people that are still in the fight of doing good in the world is Annie and Huey, and I just don't know why. I just don't know if they can just be able to operate freely without VOT, keeping track of their activities or whatever.
Well, you ruined the ending for me, Rohith. So there we go. Okay, so kidding. But look, I like naming the baby Robin. I thought it's like in the same spot the show started with. I don't know.
I mean, it's literally the Albus Severus Dumbledore, like the two bravest people. It's like if like Huey's kid was a boy, would he name him after A-Train?
Well, technically, he could still call it Robin.
I mean, like Reggie Robin or whatever. No, but that's the thing. It's just
Robin. Like, Robin can be a boy's name too.
No. I know that's something. Reggie Robin. It's just very hokey.
Who's not gonna call it the guy that killed Robin?
Well, no. But like, okay, call it like Robin. Like, well, like that's the thing. It's like naming him after his like dead ex-girlfriend is. That's. I don't know if that like I feel like for all intents and purposes,
Let me point you to a Dragon Ball Z example here. Okay, Krillin named
Dragon Ball
his daughter.
You cannot use Dragon Ball Z as an example of justifying questionable storytelling decisions.
That's justifying a name.
Okay, I think it's hokey.
But Krillin named his daughter after his ex-girlfriend.
That's. I mean, in real life, no one would be comfortable or okay with their kid being.
I think this show made an argument for naming the child after the ex-girlfriend.
Well, all right. Well, I guess in real life, if we see, I guess this is the thing where it's like, I don't know. This is something where it's like. For everything else, it's like Huey and Annie's ending is not bad in light of the questionable logistics of them operating. But I don't know. I think it's just the way that it became like a happy, like everyone's like off to do their good things, and yet the machine that's made someone like Homelander still operating, and for all intents and purposes, they got away the guy was scot-free. There's no calls for regulations or reforms or like ousting of Stan Edgar. Like, like there's not like a substantial reproach or challenge to Vought. Like Vought is pretty much just the same without Homelander.
Okay, so I'm just going to read off some comments and just wrap us up here. So Teddy in the comments points out, to be fair, I agree with him. In this world, soup shouldn't exist. However, they do not. So just killing all of them with no consideration that some of them aren't evil is just genocide. LOL. However, the goal should be to get rid of Vought and make sure future soups aren't made. My problem is them stopping Butcher and killing Homelander as a happy ending, job's done kind of thing. When I'm here, guys, you still have to deal with Vought. MM, why are you retiring?
Yeah, it'd be like if this Odin Ritual trilogy ended with them killing Vader and the Emperor still in power, like ruling part of it. Yeah, you get what I mean? Like that. This feels
like there's unfinished business to you.
Yes,
That's being Vought should have been completely
all that being resolved in spinoffs or whatever. Like that's just unfair.
All right. Okay, so I guess just at the end of the day, here's kind of summarize it. I like I don't know. I like the performances. I like just, I guess, maybe, I think the season, at least on the surface level, I suppose. I think I don't know. I liked it. He didn't. That's that's what it is. Look, Rohith's making a lot of really good points. I don't disagree with any of them. I just, I don't disagree with most of them. I think the performances and I think kind of the character motivations tracked ultimately, I guess, is maybe where I'm coming down on it. I think we had some standout scenes and sequences, which I don't know, I think carried at least a lot more than season 4 did. I got more out of it than I did season 4, but it's clearly it's not as strong as it was in the beginning, and that shows. And yeah, Rohit's right; it's a different show. I think what it changed into isn't all bad. Like most shows, as they go forward, they either lose part of the DNA or they change into something else. So I think are there missed opportunities in the writing? Probably. But I don't know. I still look. I lived for like the Homelander and the Soldier Boy stuff that we did in the show. I thought it was compelling, and overall, I kind of liked where it shook at by the end. I don't think naming the baby after the ex-girlfriend was bad, but that's just me. And that's pretty much the show. So we want to thank the folks for tuning in, and hopefully, we didn't bore you to tears. We have Teddy times 5. We have, Dr. John Von Kelling in the comments as well, and we'll thank Jacob for running things behind the scenes, and that'll do it, right?
Yeah.
All right. See you, folks. Till next Amazon show. Spider Noir. Bye-bye.